How to make lo-fi beats in 2024. Why did I specify 2024 in that title? That's because lo-fi has changed drastically ever since its origin about 15 to 20 years ago maybe. Compared to the other genres, lo-fi is a relatively new genre. When it first broke into the scene, it just consisted of basically sampled anything with some hip-hop drums slapped on it. Low quality samples and hip-hop drums. That was the new norm when lo-fi came out. In fact, that's where the name lo-fi came from, low fidelity. But fast forward 20 years into the future, it's 2024, and suddenly modern lo-fi doesn't sound like lo-fi anymore. It contains some of the properties of the old school lo-fi, but all the sounds and samples used are all high quality. So that makes it hi-fi? That name will probably never catch on, but in this video I'll show you exactly what you need to know to start making high quality lo-fi beats in 2024. So let's make some hi-fi. If any of my subscribers read, I finished the Mistborn series, by the way. I finished reading The Hero of Ages, and my god, I love that ending. I'm reading the Witcher series. This is the second book of the Witcher saga, Time of Contempt. I'm a fan of the game, so that's why I wanted to read the book, so I'll let you guys know how that goes. Now let's make some music.
Bravo 6. Going dark.
There's also several types of lo-fi now. It's not just the classic lo-fi beats now. You have ambient lo-fi, sleepy lo-fi, jazz hop beats. Lo-fi is definitely evolving as time goes. And in order to keep the genre alive, I think it's our duty as producers to evolve with the genre. So let's make a chord progression. I have my favorite piano with me, the Imagiro piano. So I'm just gonna play something real quick. Excuse me for a second while I edit this and make it sound a little bit better, because I'm not a pianist and I know this wasn't the best of recordings. So hold on for 1 second and afterwards I'll explain exactly what I did to make it sound really good.
A few moments later.
Hey, sorry that took a while, but I'm done with the piano progression. I made an 8-bar loop. I added a couple of extra notes for variations that I didn't play while recording. That's always important. You have to make sure the piano sounds as realistic as possible. Remember, everything has to sound pristine. Obviously, yeah, there are some exceptions, but then this is the vast majority of lo-fi beats nowadays. So the things you can do to make it sound more interesting. Make sure you strum the chords instead of just playing all the notes at once at the same velocity. Make sure you strum the chords like this. You can hear just how lush they sound just with that extra little movement. I understand that playing it might be a little too hard. Not all of us are like piano masters, right? So all you have to do, let's take this chord for instance. What I like to do, I always keep the piano bass note aligning with the line. I want it to be in sync with the actual bass. Keep that on the line. Take your second note over here, push it forward in front of the line a little bit. Any third note or something, push it behind and follow that pattern. You can mix and match with different notes, but this is the basic principle that you need to follow initially. So it'll sound like this. Hear that difference? You have to think like a pianist. No pianist would ever play something too consistently. That's just not human. And the other thing that you have to do is make sure the velocities are all somewhat the same. Make sure no note is like too loud or too low. This is what I like to do. You see these lines, these thicker lines? So I like to leave my velocities below this second line, below this line. That gives it that soft, lush sound. I'll show you an example. So this is how I have it now, below the second line, and it sounds like this. Soft and lush. That's how you want your lo-fi to be, as opposed to this. So I'm just going to increase the velocities just to show you guys. immediately loses that soft nature that it had. There are exceptions, of course. There are type of lo-fi that would require you to have a little bit more velocity. I make that type of lo-fi as well. I make all types of lo-fi, so you just gotta know when. But the majority of lo-fi nowadays that are being accepted by labels want you to have this kind of softness to your sounds, and that's what I'm showing you. Now, the effects that I use to get this type of sound, you can probably use this effects chain with any piano. I personally like the Imagiro piano because of how it sounds pre-processed. I have an EQ. I cut out the sub and a little bit of the low mid because this piano plugin has a lot of low end, a lot of low mids. So it can get very rumbly in the mix. And since this is where most of the muddy frequencies are located, make sure you have a control on that low mid section. And then I just cut out the highs because I don't need that. I like how it sounds without the sharp high end. After that, I have a multiband compressor. I use a preset called Warmer, either that or the general purpose 2. Either way, it just boosts the levels a little bit. Next, the most important element in my opinion is the OTT. Now the OTT adds a bit of texture to the piano. It adds this noise, for lack of a better word, and this is what gives my pianos that characteristic texture, again for lack of a better word. But I make sure that the depth is at like 15 to 20% because it's a very intense plugin. I boost the mids a little bit and I just move this high fader to the right a little bit, and that's basically what I do to get the sound. Then I route the first channel to the second and I add a reverb, and I just make sure to push the fader down to lower the intensity of the reverb. After all that, this is what it sounds like. Now I'm just gonna add a quick bass. Let's just get that out of the way. My bass notes are the most basic bass notes known to mankind. All I do is follow the bass notes of the piano, and that's good enough for me. And I just use this one-shot bass by a sample pack by a lo-fi producer named Nlove, the Nlove Sound Kit, one-shot jazz bass. Just copy the bass notes. Bass. Also with the bass, you have to be careful of the velocity. Right now it's following the velocities of the piano as well. You can keep it like that, but I like to have a little bit more bass on my songs, so I'm just gonna boost it till here. Perfect. I don't really add much of processing to the bass. I sidechain the kick to the bass, but other than that, I don't really do much. Sometimes I add an EQ, cut out the high end. And sometimes I also add a saturator plugin, something like this. It gives the bass harmonics, which makes it stand out a little bit more in the mix. Now we're gonna stack 2 pads on top of each other. Why 2 pads? This is important. The first pad that I'm gonna use is gonna act as a foundation. The only notes you're gonna be playing with that pad is the root note and the 5th note. The pad that I like to use normally for this kind of sound, it's the radio preset from Piano Pads by Labs. Labs is the only plugin you need to make lo-fi. It has every sound you could possibly need. Piano, pads, guitar, everything is covered. It even has drums, but then I wouldn't recommend them on lo-fi. But yeah, it has some of the best pads that I've ever heard in my life. Play the root note and the 5th. For me, that would be this. Fix that in a bit. Extend that. And then to make sure it doesn't get too intense, make a couple of curves like this, and I just do that. This kind of EQ curve, it doesn't cut out the lows and highs completely. It just shaves it off a little bit. As you can see, the sound is mostly based in this little section, the low mids and the mids. So just cover up that section. It might be a little too low to notice, but then not all the sounds need to be like blatantly obvious in the mix. You need to keep some sounds at the back of the mix and give room for more important elements to shine. You don't want frequencies clashing with each other. You don't want sounds clashing with each other. Every sound has their own place in the mix. So that is the foundation pad. The next pad that we need to use, I'm going to be choosing Labs again because it's such a good plugin with some good sounds. It's called Osini from the Textural Pads library. The objective of this pad is to like give a little bit of motion and movement to the song so it doesn't sound as stale as it is. Lo-fi used to be about simplicity and repetition, but then that has quickly gone down the drain. Every label nowadays looks for non-repetitive stuff. You have to keep the listener interested, but make sure you don't overdo it. You have to find that fine line, and it may take a while to get there, but I assure you, if you keep working at it, you'll definitely get there. So with this pad, I'm just going to come up with a small melody. So notice the difference between the tonality of the two pads. The foundational pad is more ambient and it's more hidden in the mix. The transitional pad, as I like to call it, it stands out a lot more. And that's how I like to keep my pads. For this kind of a pad, you can add a plugin like Pancake 2. Pancake 2 is a panning plugin and you can control the direction of the flow. So if you listen now, if you're using headphones, you can hear it bounce from left to right according to this line that you see. That'll sound really good in the mix overall. I think I'll add a little guitar pattern. I love adding guitar to my music. This plugin in particular, the Vinyl Guitar 2, sounds amazing, and it's also free. Now, it may look like it, but this isn't a how to make lo-fi using only free plugins kind of video. I will be doing a video like that in the future. This is just the beginning of the series. It's just a coincidence that most of the sounds I tend to use are actually free because I couldn't afford expensive plugins and I just learned how to make the best with what I had. So let's try to make the best guitar melody, I guess. Now, the electric guitar is actually preferred more than the acoustic guitar, especially in ambient tracks like this. But it's always fun to break out of the social norms. If you have a vision and if you can make it work, go for it. Now, the last melodic element that I'd like to add is a piano lead. The original is Felt Piano by Spitfire Audio. Just improvised that last bit, but it turned out pretty good. Duplicate these notes and lower it down an octave. Then I nudge it to the right a little bit. That's all you need. Always keep in mind that after every 4 bars, change something up a little bit. Add a new sound, add a new melody. Make sure to keep it interesting, but don't go overboard. Like I said in the beginning, there is a fine line between overproducing and underproducing, I guess. You're not going to find that line immediately, but with a lot of trial and error and rejections, tons of rejections, you're finally going to find your sound. And to conclude that lo-fi beat, it started heavily raining outside. Perfect. But yeah, that was the beat that I made. I hope you understood what I was trying to teach you about modern day contemporary lo-fi beats or hi-fi beats. If you stick to this formula, labels are gonna love you. Lo-fi fanatics are gonna love you. I'll be continuing this series, making more and more about modern day lo-fi and the little tips and tricks you can use. So like and subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and I'll see you next week.